Joining us today is Alan Lane, CEO of Silvergate Bank, father of 5. Alan, great to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Maybe for the audience, maybe explain, what do you do, and is there any big events coming up on the horizon in your life that, kind of are the next big goals that you're looking forward to?
Sure. So professionally, I'm CEO of a local community bank here in San Diego, and I've been in banking for most of my career, although I've done stuff in private industry as well. And married, 5 kids, 12 grandkids, and 2 more on the way. So the biggest milestones my wife and I just click off is, when are the next grandkids coming? We've got 2 more coming in May.
Congrats.
Thank you.
So how did you get to that point? Where did you grow up? What was growing up like for you?
Well, my dad was in the Marine Corps, and so we moved around a little bit when I was really young. But from about 2nd grade on, he was stationed here at Camp Pendleton in San Diego. Okay. And he went overseas a couple times, but always came back to Pendleton. And so I've essentially been a North County, San Diego guy since I was in 2nd grade. And went to Vista High School, Palomar College, San Diego State University. So I've been in San Diego for most of my life, the life that I can remember anyway.
Which is interesting because out here you don't run into that many people who are from here. It seems like.
Yeah, I'm as close to a native as they come. I think in San Diego.
Nice,
yeah.
Gotcha. So now, do you have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have 3 brothers.
Okay.
I'm the oldest, and Debbie has 6 brothers, and she's the only girl.
Gotcha.
So. There's a long line of boys on both sides of the family.
I know a little bit about your background, but not a lot. I know you met your wife pretty young.
Yep.
Right? So when did you meet your wife?
So Debbie and I actually met in high school.
Okay.
We met in 10th grade in driver's ed.
Nah.
And so we've known each other a long time. Known each other, a lot longer than half our lives, and so we didn't date in high school though. We were friends. We went to the same church, so we would see each other at youth group. I did have a crush on her, I will admit. And if you look at our 10th grade yearbook and you look at her picture, I have stars around it. And so anyway, so we started dating right after high school. And got married young. We got married while I was in college, and started having kids pretty early as well.
So why didn't you date in high school? Were you just too afraid to ask her out, or what was the?
She was always going out with somebody. She's very attractive, and she was always dating somebody else, and so. But it was probably good because I got to know her, and of course I wanted to date her, but. And if I say too much about the guys she dated, I'll get in trouble.
Right.
So.
And you said you went to the same church, so what church did you go to?
We went to St. Francis Catholic Church in Vista.
So you grew up Catholic?
Grew up Catholic,
okay.
And she did as well, obviously. And so we'd see each other, every day at school, and then we'd see each other at church, and we'd see each other at youth group, and so yeah.
So are both of your parents Catholic as well then, or?
Yeah, actually, my parents aren't anymore. I don't know that they'd consider themselves Catholic anymore. They've kind of fallen away. But Debbie's parents are Catholic, and her dad is actually a deacon in the church, and that's a whole interesting side story because he became a deacon the same day that we got married.
Oh.
Yeah, so obviously there was a process leading up to that. But it was a very big day. You asked earlier about goals. Well, that was a very big milestone in both of our families, obviously, because on that day, June 13th of 1981, he was ordained a deacon in the morning here in San Diego. And that evening, he officiated at our wedding at St. Francis in Vista.
Faith is important to you, and it's strong. Has it always been strong, even though your parents aren't practicing anymore? Is that?
Yeah, that's
how did that develop?
That's a great question because I think all of us are on a journey. We're all on a faith journey, and at times we probably feel closer to the Lord and stronger in our faith. Sometimes stronger than others. I think, obviously, I believe that meeting Debbie when I did, and the fact that we shared a common faith has allowed me to grow stronger, allowed Debbie to grow stronger, and has obviously been very important in our family life. Early on, I can't say that I owned the faith. It was kind of what we did because my dad grew up Catholic, and so we went to Mass on Sunday. At some point in everybody's life, they have to make the faith their own. And I can't say that I had done that prior to getting married, but certainly as we started having kids, I think I can point to the time that I kind of made the faith my own.
And that was after having kids?
Yeah, it was. And it actually, ironically, was probably as my parents were splitting up. Because they were splitting up, and we had kids already, and I don't remember. If I thought about it long enough, I could probably figure out, did we have 3, 4, or 5 kids at the time? But at that point, I remember asking myself, is this real? I never thought my parents would get divorced. And now here I am, at that time with young children and, going to Mass every Sunday. And is this real or isn't it? And that caused me to search and to really look at what we believe and why we believe what we believe. And that then led me to start teaching the CCD classes at our church for the young kids as our kids were growing up. And that reinforced the faith. And so...
Did you always want to become a banker? Because your whole career's been around mostly that.
Right.
Where did that come from?
Actually, when I first started college, I thought I was going to be an engineer. And so I've always had a gift for numbers, so math and science. And that's kind of what I excelled in high school and then early on in college. More so the math and the science, and as proof of that, when you major in engineering, you have to have a lot of science as well. And I did okay in the high school science, but when I got into college, the science kind of lagged. And I quickly decided, gosh, this chemistry stuff is pretty tough, and I got to take a lot more of this if I'm going to be an engineer. So, what else can I do? And that same semester, I was taking a class in economics, and just about everybody else in that class hated it. They were all econ, and they were groaning, and I was just eating it up. I was loving it. It made sense, and so I took more, and so that combined with I was already working at a bank while I was in college. I started out as a teller, and so I was working in banking, so I switched my major. I actually hadn't even declared yet, so I decided to major in economics. And all the elective courses that I took were business courses in accounting and finance and marketing and management. And so I ended up with a bachelor's in econ, but with a business. It wasn't really a minor, but with an emphasis in business.
I think you are the first person that I've ever met that has said they loved their econ class.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever come across that.
Yeah, I just loved it.
And did you think you would go into banking with that, or did you have some other sort of plan of using the econ?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I knew that I enjoyed the financial arena, but I was young, and I didn't really know. I mean, to me, that arena was still fairly small. It was commercial banking, and but I also really like people and like interacting with people. And the funny thing about being in commercial banking is, you're dealing with small businesses. So you're dealing with people, you're dealing with numbers, you're dealing with finance. So it all kind of works. So I can't say I chose it. kind of chose me, but it's been something that I've been very comfortable doing, and it's worked out really well.
Now, as the CEO, do you still get to do those types of things? You know, like with many companies, it's like those things you enjoy, as you move up the ranks, you end up not getting to do those. Do you still get to work with people the way?
I do, and so one of the most enjoyable parts of my job is when I go out on a call with one of our branch managers or one of our loan officers and actually get out of the office and get out and get to meet a business owner and hear their story and how they got started. And one of the things that I'm constantly amazed at the way people make money and the way they the way they find little. There's so many small businesses out there that are doing unique things, and so yeah, it's one of the most enjoyable parts of the job.
And is that where you find the fulfillment, is dealing with your employees and those people? Because from the outside, thinking about a banker, you don't think about that you deal with people very much. It seems like a cold job in some ways, is the only way I can think of about it. So is that like what keeps you going every day, and those types of interactions, or like do you just love going into work every day? What's the
most days I do. I don't get to go out every day and meet with customers, but I enjoy the people that I work with, and it's in a sense it's a vocation, because it's something that as the CEO, obviously I'm responsible for running the company, for providing a return to shareholders, but we're also providing jobs for a lot of employees, and we're providing financial resources for businesses and for homeowners, and so yeah, when you stop and think about the impact that we have, it's pretty rewarding.
Now, do you find any ways, like obviously your Catholic faith has a lot to say about economics and how we treat people, which doesn't always come across as friendly to the shareholder maybe. How are you able to kind of balance that? Do you see that impact? Do you think about those types of things in your everyday work and how you guys go about running the company, or is it pretty separate and
for me personally, it's I try to integrate it every day. A lot of times it will come out in ways that you might not really expect, but the financial crisis that our country and the entire world went through here over the last few years really, I think, pointed to some of the excesses, and the fact that there was plenty of blame to go around. This wasn't just it wasn't the bank's fault. It wasn't Congress. It was everybody trying to grab a piece of what of what they were due, and or trying to climb the ladder or enjoy the good life, or whatever. And the reality is sometimes the answer is no, or wait, or and so at our bank, quite often we'll have a conversation with someone that's trying to borrow money, and we'll say, this is not the best thing for you to be doing right now. You're going to put your company in jeopardy by going into debt right now. So, and that's not always a welcome message, but I think it's a responsible thing to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you, because a lot of time, we don't hear much in the news about how it's the individual's fault, the whole crisis, but if we didn't have such an appetite for debt to leverage to buy stuff that maybe we shouldn't buy right now.
Right.
So, do you find that often? I guess you deal mostly with companies, so it's maybe not as many personal situations, but it seems like it'd be hard to lend money to somebody where you're like, wow, you're just really overextending yourself, and this is bad. Do you guys find that often, or because you're on the commercial side, is that less prevalent?
No, we actually do indirectly, because one of the business channels that we operate is actually an arm of the bank that lends money to mortgage companies that make home loans. And because most mortgage banks, they're not banks, they don't have their own funding, so they need interim funding from somewhere. And so our bank provides that funding. And so we certainly we still get to see it. And I think you're right. Prior to the financial crisis, the mentality was, well, real estate values are going to go up forever, and you can just refinance and pull more money out, and then you can do it again next year and do it again next year. And where did that money go? A lot of it went to just consumerism, buying new cars and boats and RVs and going on vacations, and those are all great things, but done in excess and outside of a person's means, all that has to be paid for at some point.
Right. So how do you teach your kids, for example, about taking on debt responsibly and those types of things when you offer those products on one side? Are you, how do you teach your kids to manage that?
Yep. Yeah. Very, very good question. So, one, I think we need to teach our kids to live within their means, but taking even a step back from that, I think it starts by recognizing that everything that we have is a gift from God. And so the first thing is, no matter how much you make, I believe that we should tithe 10% of our income. And Debbie and I have done that since I was working part-time and in college, and we were making very, very little, and 10% of a little is even littler. But doing that because it helps keep things in perspective. Everything we have is a gift, and so we give back first to God, and then we make sure that our needs are met. And then once our needs are met, if you have anything left over, then you should save some, and then after that, then you can enjoy, buying something for yourself. And in the early years, there wasn't a lot left over, and we've been blessed to where, now, we certainly don't want for anything.
Right. But how do you translate that? So you started, at that level, and then you built a comfortable life for yourself. Most of your children grew up with a fairly comfortable life then.
Sure. Yeah.
So their definition of needs might be, more aligned with, somebody that's making a lot more money. How did you help them kind of rein that in, or did you just teach them to go make some good money quickly? No,
it's interesting. Going back to when I was growing up, my dad, I owe a lot of who I am as a man, I owe to my dad. He not only did he raise me Catholic, but he taught me responsibility, my work ethic I got from my dad. And I remember, I got my driver's license at 16. And I was very blessed that my parents gave us boys, they gave us a car to drive, but they didn't put it in our name. But they made a vehicle available, but we had to take care of it. And that meant that we had to have a job. We had to pay for our own insurance. We had to pay for our own gas. And that meant that we had to work. And then we had to maintain the vehicle. So I still remember getting a little notebook, and I would have to keep track in that notebook of putting aside, a certain amount of money each month for tires, for shocks, for brakes, for all those kind of things, because we were driving old cars. I mean, my first car was a 1967 Datsun pickup. That was Datsun is the former Nissan for for the younger generation out there.
Nice. So did you replicate that with your kids?
We did.
When they grew
Yeah,
up?
yeah. Thanks for getting me back on track. So with each one of the kids, we did exactly the same thing. We said, okay, here's a vehicle for you to drive, but you've got to pay for your gas, you got to pay for your insurance, and so we pretty much just did the same thing. So I had a great mentor in my father in that respect. It worked for me, and so it worked for our kids.
You've mentioned a few times that you and your wife got married young, and the children of yours that I know have all pretty much followed that pattern.
Yep.
And I know that I've told a lot of people that I think that that's the most brilliant thing that I've heard in a long time. Would you speak to that philosophy and how you kind of instilled that and encouraged that? Because I think I've seen plenty of parents that have the opposite mentality, that kids shouldn't get married until much later, and so can you speak to where that comes from and how it's played out in your family?
Yep. So both Debbie's parents and my parents got married young. So it comes originally from them, at least in our family. Okay, they both got married when they were in their, late teens, early 20s. Debbie and I got married when we were 19, and we had our oldest son 13 months later, and I throw that in there because oftentimes, oh, you got married young, you started having kids right away. And it was one of those things where, and I've mentioned obviously our faith plays a big part in this, but once you know that yes, this is the person that God intends for me to spend the rest of my life with, and if we, I didn't understand all of this then as well as I do now, and I'm sure I'll understand it a lot more, and maybe I even have a faulty understanding of it now. But in Ephesians 5, it talks about husbands loving their wives as Christ loves the church, and so if my vocation, my primary vocation is this other person, and to try to help Debbie get to heaven, and then we're blessed with children, and our goal is to get them to heaven, then everything else that we do has to kind of support that, and it all has to kind of work. And so the getting married young part, it wasn't that we chose, hey, I got to be married by a certain date. It was more about when it's time, it's time. And for us, that just seemed to make sense. Now, I already had a plan. I already knew what I was doing in terms of where I was going to go to school. I already had a job. And so even though I didn't know what I was going to do, it wasn't like I had picked a certain profession. I knew that I could support her. So that's really what we've tried to instill in our kids, which is when you meet the right person, you'll know. And as long as you have a plan, then, and if part of that plan is waiting, for instance, both our oldest kids, our two oldest, are both dentists. And they both got married after undergraduate college, but they were married while they were in dental school. And but they had a plan, so they had met somebody that they fell in love with, somebody else who shared their faith, and they had a plan for their life. And to me, that's really the important thing.
So as long as they have a plan, you're okay with it.
Yeah, if they come to us and say, "Hey, we're madly in love. We've fallen in love. God really wants us to get married," and and we've had this discussion, and not everybody has not all of our kids have married the first one that they thought they were going to marry, and so we've had this opportunity to have this discussions. Well, what's your plan? Because I think that's prudence. I mean, so.
Yeah, it's interesting for me because I know a lot of people that think you have to be completely secure, and then I throw out, well, what if you lose your job the day after you get married?
Right.
Well, does that really make any difference?
Right.
But it seems like more and more people are like, no, you have to be out of college, you have to be established, and it just seems like that's a disservice in many ways.
Yeah, so many of the milestones that society would say, okay, yeah, you've got to finish college, you have to have a job. You have to buy a house. You have to have all that stuff set, and then you can get married. You're missing out on some great years then. And so it's not about that. It's just, does that our hope, Debbie and I, we hoped and prayed that we were raising our sons to be the kind of man that could provide for their wives and provide for their families, and it's not that you have to be a dentist or you have to be a banker, but can you do something, and do you have that drive that if you do lose your job, what are you going to do tomorrow? So.
I don't know if this is the case, but from all of your children that I know, faith is really important to them, which is exceptional about your family in many ways. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because, most families, even if the parents seem to be strong in their faith, there's at least a few of the kids where that faith just becomes not important for them,
Sure.
or they reject it completely
Right.
altogether.
Right.
Can you point to what do you think like really enabled your children to kind of own it on their own? Because I don't get the impression from the ones that I know that I just do this because my parents do. Like they all own their faith pretty well.
Yeah, I think we're very blessed that way, and we comment quite often that they're light years ahead of where we were at their age. And in terms of how that happened, I mean, first and foremost, I think it's by the grace of God. With Debbie and I, it's always been real important that we have a united front, if you will, and it's a partnership, and it's been a partnership from the very beginning. We've been very fortunate that she was able to stay home with the kids, and so the kids always had mom at home when they came home from school. I think that's really key, and then I think the fact that I was active in their education, in the faith part of their education. We didn't homeschool. I always kind of figured, I did okay.
Right.
I'm a product of public school, and I did okay, and so. So in some respects, maybe that made it harder on them because they lived their faith openly, even when they were, going through public school. But I also think it helped prepare them because they didn't have this kind of, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, but they didn't have a bubble per se. They certainly had a safe haven at home. But they were living in the world, in public schools and sports and all the activities and everything, and then participating in church activities, which we were usually involved in, and I was leading quite a bit. So,
one of the other cool things I know that I've heard about you is that when your kids turned 16, right, you would take them to Rome. Was that optional or?
Yeah, so it wasn't 16. It was actually when they graduated from high school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
but yes, that actually grew out of a selfish desire that I had to go to Rome.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it just seemed like just a great way for me to spend time with each one of the kids, to take them to Rome, which is where the Pope is, where the Vatican is, where where the roots of the foundation of the Catholic Church, the rock.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's European history, it's the history of civilization, and you go to Rome and between the museums and the churches and the Colosseum, you cover a lot there, and so wasn't sure how it was going to work out when we first started, but I did it with the oldest, with Alan Jr., and was able to do it. All the kids are 2 years apart, so every 2 years, there for a span of 10 years, every 2 years we got to go to Rome. Once we got through the boys and it was time for the girls to go, then Debbie went with me.
So I was going to ask,
Yeah. So then it became, a mom and dad trip.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, that's what I wondered. As Kate and I were talking about it the other night, it's like, I'd love to take the whole family to Rome, but when you have little kids, it's like impossible. And then I brought up your idea. It's like, oh, that could really work well.
Yeah.
That's a good approach.
It was quite a blessing.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked a little bit about personal finance, but again, because we have you here as a banker, and we all need help. So how do obviously you didn't always have an income that let you kind of spend a little more probably, and you mentioned one of the things I love that you mentioned was how even when you earned a little bit you were tithing, which I think is the hardest for people to do. It's so easy when you're not making what you feel like is enough to cut that out of the budget because it's an easy place to come from. Can you speak to a little bit both, at least in my experience, every time you tithe, like you do get the generosity paid back, far more than what you gave, and how you went kind of like, have you just always been really disciplined with your money, or has it been a learning process to get to managing money well?
Yeah, it's been a learning process for sure. The discipline question is interesting because I wasn't quite sure where you were going with that word. We've always been very disciplined about tithing. And quite frankly, I think if we weren't, then the other discipline probably, or just the financial discipline probably wouldn't be there still to this day, because we haven't, to your point, we haven't always. I mean, we're not independently wealthy. I still need to work, right? Okay, but we don't want for anything, and we don't have any debt, and that wasn't always the case. And so growing up, getting married young, having kids young, getting into our first house, we took on some debt, and we early on, we didn't have enough money for a down payment, so we borrowed the down payment, and so then now you've got debt. Okay, more so than just the debt on the home, and then inevitably something happens, right? So the car breaks down, or the water heater goes out or something, and this is why, going all the way back to the discipline that my dad tried to instill in us about save a little bit each month, so that when you need new tires or something, you've got the money. Well, that was really easy when I was single, and the only money that I had that I had to worry about was that paycheck, and I could spend whatever else. But now all of a sudden I had a family and kids that needed diapers and clothes and everything else. So we early on we got into debt, and it's well, we'll put that on the credit card and we'll pay it off at the end of the month. Well, then something else comes up, and then and where it starts to get really scary is when you're carrying a balance on the credit card and that balance is growing up toward the limit. And then, in the days of easy credit, we haven't seen it, although I think we're headed back there now. Well, then you get something in the mail that someone will, do a balance transfer, and now all of a sudden you've got new availability of credit. And so we fell into that trap early on, and it is like a chain. It really is, and it wasn't. We were never in jeopardy of losing anything. But it was because I was still employed, right? I mean, it'd be a big difference if I had debt and then all of a sudden I lost my job. Then you're one step away from losing your house or wherever, getting evicted from wherever you're renting. So once we were able to get out of debt, we vowed to never go back. But again, the interesting thing, the discipline of tithing, because when we were in debt, we would have these conversations. We'd periodically get together. My wife and I, at least once a year, and say, okay, this is where we're at. And it was so tempting to say, okay, well, gosh, we could pay this off if we just took our tithe, and X amount of months later, we'd be out of debt, and then we could give the Lord more. Well, okay. Do we trust Him enough to say, okay, no, we're not going to do that? And so the discipline was, no, we're going to put the Lord first, and then everything else after that, and start chipping away at getting out of debt. Paying off the smallest card first, and and there's different ways. You talk to financial planners, and there are different strategies of how to get out of debt once you're in debt. Ideally, you don't get into debt in the first place.
And have you been able to do that with your kids? Because I know, the problem is as kids of parents that are doing okay, it becomes really easy to be like, well, I should be able to have that nice house. And as the parent, you don't necessarily want them to have to live in a, crummy apartment in a bad section of town. So have you been able to manage that and at the same time help them so that they don't get into that debt situation that you were able to?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Number one, I honestly can't tell you whether or not they have debt, because you're asking me earlier about where do you draw the line, and so it's none of my business unless they need help, in which case I'd always be there to help my kids. But backing up to what did we do to prepare them for life, so to speak. Our goal was always, from a financial perspective, Debbie, the goal that Debbie and I had set was basically two things for our kids. One, to provide them a college education. So undergraduate was on us. Graduate school was on them. Okay, so when the boys wanted to go to dental school, they had to figure out a way to pay for that because they had other siblings that we were committed to providing the undergraduate education. And then the second thing was helping them to get into their first home. Okay, so we've been blessed to be able to help them, and it's not like we're giving them a down payment, but we're helping them. So it's kind of like a matching thing. If they can save for a down payment, we'll contribute. And so the ability to kind of help them get into their first home is the other piece. Once they're there, though, and we've got the battle scars to be able to share with them. Look, you guys, don't push it right to the limit. Don't think that, okay, we can qualify for this amount, so we're going to go for that, because guess what? You're going to get into the house and the refrigerator's going to bust, or the dishwasher. The dishwasher's classic. Every new home, or every time someone goes into a home, the dishwasher goes out in the first year, guaranteed.
Yeah, that's pretty true.
Yeah.
So you also have an interest in hiking, as we've talked about on these shows. The shows many on. Where does that come from? Is it something you've done your whole life? Is it a recent interest?
It's been an on and off thing. Growing up, we went camping quite a bit, and so it was something that my family did, and then that we did with our kids when Debbie and I got married. We got married young, and so I still had younger brothers that were in high school. So my parents and grandparents were still going camping, and we would just tag along with them. And so our kids grew up camping from when they were really little. And the hiking aspect kind of grew out of that. Wherever you're camping, you go on a hike. And now we don't do quite as much camping. We just are more specific on the hike. We've done some backpacking trips, and those are typically the guy trips. And those are fun. One
of the things that I always find interesting or wrestle with myself is kind of that balance, right? So if I want to go hiking, and like when we did Whitney, for example, that's 3-4 days away from my wife and young children. Yep. So that's always a struggle for me. Did you ever deal with that sort of struggle, or have those types of issues? Like, how do you balance, like, okay, this is really fun for me, and there's something good about it for sure, but at the same time you're putting your wife and kids in a situation that's harder on them.
Right.
How do you balance that?
So first thing is, it goes back to something I said earlier. It's a partnership, right? If your wife is not supportive of that side of you, then it's not going to work. And I wouldn't try it, okay? Because that's just a recipe for disaster. But you're right. It's a balance. And with Debbie and I, there are certain things that she might want to do. She might want to, go out with the ladies, or get together with her mom and her sister-in-laws, or whatever the case may be, or now, our daughters. Mm-hmm. And so as long as we have that balance, I respect the time that she needs as a woman to do womanly things that I don't understand, and she respects the times that we want to do guy things, and she wants us to be godly men and manly men, and that's not going to happen if you're not taking the guys off and getting dirty.
With the bank, like, do you foresee retirement in the near future? Are you going to, because you've been through a few banks at this point, what's the career path for you moving forward, or do you just kind of take it as it comes and see what happens?
There was a time when I was focused on a certain date, or a certain, by the time I turn 55, I want to be able to retire and do something else. And I've kind of changed that over the years. And I think this kind of goes back to, we're all on a journey. And I want to do whatever God wants me to do in whatever time frame that is. And I've always told Debbie, gosh, when I retire, I'd love to sit on the boards of some companies, and I'd love to teach. And but I can't picture myself doing just that right now. I like what I do, and so I'm not in any hurry to retire. I do think that when that time comes, I'm not going to want for things to do. I've got a lot of interests. I love to learn, and so I'm not trying to force anything. We'll see what God wants.
It's interesting that you're almost less anxious to retire now, because I know grandkids are a huge deal to you.
Yep.
And now that you have them, I would think you'd be more anxious to be like, yeah, I just want to spend all my time with the grandkids, but that's not entirely the case.
It is, but I recognize that probably wouldn't be appropriate. I mean, I love my grandkids, and I'd love to be there every day when they get home from school, but I'm not their dad, and so our kids need to have their own relationship with their kids, with our grandkids, and we need to have that grandparent type of a relationship, and I want to be close to them. And a couple of our kids are out of state, and so half of our grandkids are spread across the country, some in Texas and some on the East Coast. And so having a job and having income to be able to go visit them is kind of important.
So it's interesting you bring up the parent-grandparent dynamic, especially because I know you live closely with at least one of your children. Has that been hard to manage? Like, how do you manage? Because sometimes I don't think grandparents always pick up on that there's a difference. Like, a lot of grandparents still try to be the parent in any way.
Right.
Or you see it where they don't think the kids are ever making a good decision, and try to. Have you had those situations? Have you learned to manage this? Or did you kind of have that in mind as your kids got older of how to properly kind of have that outlook?
Yeah, I think I would give the mentoring credit to Debbie's dad, to Debbie's mom and dad, to her side of the family, because growing up, her parents have a lot of grandkids, 20 something, and a lot of the family is close, and so growing up and seeing them and how they've interacted with their kids, with Debbie and me, and then with our grandkids, they've got close relationships with the grandkids, but they also know kind of where to draw the line, and so we've had good mentors there.
And what do you think? What is the line? Like, what's the ideal role for a grandparent in a kid's life?
Yeah, I think it changes. I don't think there's one answer. I definitely want my heart's desire for the grandkids is the same desire that we have for our kids, and that's that they would know the Lord. They would know the Lord, that they would love their faith, and our ultimate goal is to get to heaven. But heaven isn't a place and a time somewhere out in the future. We can experience that right now. Jesus said, the kingdom of God is here now. So how do we live that? And so I just want to be in their life and share their journey. And I hate to keep using the word journey, but it's a journey, and I want to be a part of their journey.
So one of the things we like to ask people that agree to be interviewed here is to talk about what they see as the difference between the good life and the great life. And our argument's pretty simple, is that, everything out there in culture, most things teach you to want the good life. And I know you can appreciate it, because like me, I know you share this affinity for new tech gadgets.
Yep.
And we both have the habit of running out and buying them as quickly as possible, which in the good life is fine, and those types of things, and our cigars and scotch and those types of. For you, what's the difference? What goes from chasing the good life to, living the great life?
Yeah. That's a deep question. That, like you said, the gadgets and all that stuff. I mean, I love that as much as the next guy. For a while there, there were certain blogs that I looked at every day because they, the gadget blogs. When's the next iPhone going to come out? What are the features going to be? What about the next iPad? Even to this day, those things are still interesting to me. But to me, the great life is being able to share your time with people that you love. And so all the way back, when you were asking me about retirement and, the ability to spend time with the kids, or the grandkids, for me, the great life is being able to take the things of the good life, no matter what they are, but whether you have those or not, can you enjoy whatever you have? Can you enjoy that with those you love? And do you share common values? If it would be really tough. We get together. We have a family reunion every year. We have some timeshares, and so we bring the kids together every July. And as the family has grown, we now have 6 of those timeshare units because each family has their own. And so we've got 12 grandkids. There's 12 adults and 12 grandkids that all descend on the Carlsbad Inn every July. And it's not about the gadgets that you have, but certainly there's an element of the good life there, right? Because if we didn't have the ability to have those timeshares, we'd just all be getting together at our house. But instead, we're getting together at the beach. But we're just spending time together, and we're not filling it with going to Disneyland one day and SeaWorld the next. We're just enjoying each other's company. So to me, that's the great life is family.
Well, and for you too, I know it goes beyond just your immediate family.
Mm-hmm.
Justin, for example,
Yep.
He can't ever say enough nice things about you, and you really get the sense that you and Debbie were, pseudo parents to him in many ways. So, you guys were able to also kind of expand from just your family and share that great life with other people in your community, it seemed like. Was that something you consciously did, or just the natural outgrowth of your family?
I think it's just the natural outgrowth of our family. I mean, we want to be involved in our kids' life, and their friends become our friends, and we go on trips. Whether it's the Carlsbad trip or a ski trip, a snowboarding trip, the kids' friends were always welcome. As long as we had enough room for them, and we tried to make sure we had enough room for them because we thought it was important. And we've been very blessed by the extended family that way. So it's that blessing works both ways. And we've been very very blessed by the friendships that our kids have brought into our family.
Well, thank you so much for coming. If you'll watch our next episode here, we have a gift for you that's going to tie perfectly into your distinction between the good life and the great life.
Great.
So
well, thank
you very much for coming.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's great having you.